The Innkeeper by Life Sketcher. Chapter 15:11 Music to my ears. Lex took in a deep breath, readying himself for the hurdle ahead, and held it in for a few moments. When he finally released his breath, he was ready, so he opened his eyes and looked at the majestic harp in front of him. He also ignored the hundreds of broken harps behind him. They didn't exist. Only the one in front of him did. Softly, ever so softly, with the very edge of his finger, he touched the harp string. The harp quivered beneath his touch, a breath of sound barely woven into the air. Each note, though delicate, carried the weight of his restraint, a melody that danced upon the precipice of destruction. He willed his fingers to glide, not press, to coax rather than command, for even the smallest misstep could turn harmony into ruin. The strings trembled at his might, yet he tamed them just as he tamed his strength, letting only the faintest whispers escape into the silence. Lex did not play mere music, he demonstrated mastery over himself, a battle against the crushing power that resided in his hands. The notes rose and fell like ripples upon a still lake, yet behind each sound lay the effort of titanic restraint. A single mistake could bring splintered wood and sundered strings, a ruin of what should have been beauty. And so, with every breath, every stroke, he played not only for melody but for control, shaping the fragile song with a strength that did not break but bent. Then, when the tempo was set, Lex slowly eased his tensed body, for he could not always be exerting his full control over every single muscle. He had to relax and be at ease, yet that was easier said than done. Lex had eventually realized why he was having such a hard time controlling his strength, despite how much his consciousness had developed. It was because his consciousness, his brain, his very being, all were designed specifically to be able to control a certain level of power. Even previously, when he managed to arm wrestle a heavenly immortal, that was within his domain of control, since it made use of his numerous abilities. Now, though, he truly wielded the strength of a heavenly immortal at his very fingertips, and that was a kind of power his being was not equipped to handle. But his cultivation was anything if not adaptable. Lex knew that if he was still using regal embrace, then he would have no trouble facing a heavenly immortal's attack. In fact, he was certain that heavenly immortals would be entirely unable to harm him at all. That was a level of defense, unfortunately, he did not have at the moment. He had finally fallen behind what regal embrace would have otherwise given him. But he was working on remedying that at the very moment. As he played music, Lex also channeled his cultivation technique, allowing it to morph every fiber of his being to adapt to his new strength, and similarly, display it with more ease. Even without becoming a heavenly immortal, which would require a baptism of tribulations, Lex's entire essence was being altered to be able to deal with the power level in the heavenly immortal realm. That was a level of defense, unfortunately, he did not have at the moment. He had finally fallen behind what regal embrace would have otherwise given him. But he was working on remedying that at the very moment. As he played music, Lex also channeled his cultivation technique, allowing it to morph every fiber of his being to adapt to his new strength, and similarly, display it with more ease. Even without becoming a heavenly immortal, which would require a baptism of tribulations, Lex's entire essence was being altered to be able to deal with the power level in the heavenly immortal realm. Of course, for now, that only meant raw physical strength, as well as energies in the heavenly immortal realm. Lex wasn't sure what facing laws in that realm would be like. To deal with that, the proper way would be to enhance his tenet, another thing he was actively doing. By making the power of a superior realm his own, Lex was displaying the ultimate supremacy. Oddly enough, playing a masterpiece was also satisfying the requirements of his tenet. It seemed that he was claiming supremacy by creating an original work of art that could impress anyone who heard it, even if he was the only one to hear it. Oh, and Mary. Bravo, Mary said, clapping her hands as she sat in what looked like the front row of an amphitheater. Bravo indeed. It's amazing how you went from making me want to gouge out my ears to playing decent stuff in a short span of a few hours. Very amusing, said Lex. You know that as an immortal, it's practically impossible for me to be unable to learn something as simple as music. Yes, but simply learning music, and infusing emotions into the music are two different concepts. Don't even begin to spout that inane theory that music is just patterns. If that were the case, the AI race would have mastered musical Tao eons ago and would have ruled the universe. Just take the compliment. I feel like you're letting more and more things slip these days, Lex muttered, looking at her from the corner of her eyes. Becoming more mean too, he finished his sentence under his breath. I think this is the last step, right? Mary asked, playing with the laurel wreath she took off from her head. Yeah, that about does it. I should be fine to return now, he said and closed his eyes, exiting the artificial room he was in, and returning to the golden jelly. As it turned out, the jelly not only perfectly contained his strength, it also created trials for him to overcome one at a time, allowing him to completely hone himself. Truth be told, if it hadn't been for his cultivation technique it would have taken him much longer. But even so, the golden jelly would have managed to help him along. That was because the jelly was constantly nourishing Lex's body with numerous heavenly materials, helping it adapt to his new strength. Lex truly began to wonder what price the governor paid to send him here, for the resort clearly didn't hold back when using valuable resources. That was another fundamental difference between the inn and the resort. The inn just happened to be filled with countless valuable materials, all of which just happened to help guests along. None of it was deliberate. He would have to change that soon. Chapter 1512 Another Proposal. Lex exited the golden jelly, finally in control of his body and aura once more. Although the jelly was not actually sticky, he still felt an overwhelming urge to take a bath once he exited it. Fortunately, such a thing was quite easily arranged. While Lex took a quick break from his busy schedule to shower, he couldn't help but think about his time at the resort. Back on Earth, if he heard the term resort, he would associate it with a vacation filled with spa activities of all sorts. In a way, the Seraphim Resort lived up to that expectation since basically all he had done here was receive various treatments that helped him consolidate his cultivation, or somehow grow stronger. Oh, he also detoxed from Tao aura exposure, so very much just like a cultivator spa. Yet he could not help but feel that he probably did not get to experience a traditional visit to a resort at least for an immortal. The resort was more than just its services, of which it had many. In fact, due to Lex's time constraints, he hadn't been able to use most of the services which took weeks if not months to complete. After all, to an immortal, a couple of weeks was barely any time at all. He could not help but recall the strange sights he saw when he first entered the resort, and all that was left unexplored. Since he was limited to the area reserved for those with the premium package, he never saw those sights again. He not only wondered what they were like, but also wondered what the area reserved for Tao beings was like. If the opportunity to explore it was presented to him he would never take it. The Tao was not for him to explore just yet. Even so, he couldn't help but wonder. The time for wondering was coming to an end, however. He would soon return to the inn, and then have to add 3 new features to the inn that he saw at the resort. Adding Heaven's guidance would have been a good idea, but for that Lex would need to create a heaven first. There was no way Lex could manage that so soon. He would need to add some more common features of the resort to the inn, but that would result in a more common ranking for him. It truly was a conundrum. While Lex was lost in his thoughts, a certain part of his consciousness swept through the inn, as it usually did. But this time, now that Lex was no longer focused on his own training, he could no longer ignore an oddity he had noticed long ago. "Hey Mary, what is he up to? Why does he look so strained?" Lex asked. "He's been like that for at least a few days." While within the resort merely 1.5 days had passed, within the inn a lot more time had gone by. "Not sure actually," Mary said, twirling her laurel wreath on her fingers. "He seems to be heading in the direction of the innkeeper's office. Maybe he has something to report, but is worried about the consequences." "Are you saying he's going to tattle on himself? That doesn't make sense. They have full faith in the innkeeper. They wouldn't fear him. It must be something else." "You're right, it's unusual. He's even missed a few shifts of work. But, since the security team isn't responding, it must not be something bad. You'll have to investigate when you return." Lex suddenly had a solemn feeling. He'd never seen an inn worker, at least one of the inn workers the system provided, take a holiday of their own volition before. "I just have one last thing to do, then I'll return to the inn," Lex said, and forcefully exited the divine shower. Lex looked at the shower for a moment and wondered if he should buy that off the resort too. It was divine not just because it was in a heaven, but because the water temperature was just divine. Shaking his head, Lex focused on the tasks ahead. He needed to meet with Shireen, and then get the lotus from Lykanderov. Technically he had some time at the resort left, but there was no need to complete it. Z's odd behavior worried Lex, and so he wanted to speed things along. Lex summoned Lykanderov and shared his intention to leave early, but the response he got was unexpected. "You mean I can come back to the resort whenever I want to complete the time?" Lex asked, incredulously. "Yes. You have about 11 hours of time left in the premium package, which might not sound like a lot. But if you downgrade it, that's almost a few years' worth of time in any of the lower levels." "I'll keep that in mind," said Lex as he put away a summoning card. Much like the coupon that brought him here, the summoning card could bring him back to the resort if he ever wished. An important thing to note was that he couldn't transfer the card to anyone else, and could only be used by him. Lex didn't feel too strongly about that at the moment, for as he continued to observe Z's expression at the inn, he felt that resolving the matter with him was the most urgent thing. Lex did not have any brothers, a blessing, considering his family situation, but over the years he had come to consider Z as a younger brother. Now that he was watching that younger brother trudge through the dirt, he felt the incredible urge to go draw a mustache on his face and take a picture with his Polaroid. And also resolve his issues, but that came after the Polaroid. But in all seriousness, Lex had lost the will to joke around, so he promptly found Shireen and the other Valkyries, and once again convened a meeting. He couldn't help but wonder why they were always together, but decided to ignore the question. "You had another proposal for me," he said. Chapter 15:13 Bait. Shireen looked at Lex and could practically read the urgency that was painted all over his face. Seeing how he was not in the mood for small talk, she got right to the heart of the matter, which also suited her just fine. "Previously I asked you to deliver a letter for me, and you expressed hesitation. That is likely because you correctly guessed that it will not be easy to deliver said letter, and will likely face many obstacles from those who want to hamper me. Yet it is for that reason I also offered you a favor in exchange. Although, confined to the resort, I cannot make direct use of my power, I am not without influence either. Like I said, I have made many friends and contacts throughout my years at the resort, and all of them are well-connected, influential people. Some might even consider you an influential contact I have made as a result of the resort." "You aren't wrong," said Lex. "But even if I want to complete your wish, I may not be able to. I have my own commitments and tasks that I need to complete." "Yes, I concluded as much. That is why I have an alternative offer for you. Like I said previously, the reason I need to deliver this letter is to garner support for my granddaughter. Many will expect me to do such a thing, and indeed many will also conclude that I have asked this favor of you. My request to you is, to not deny such claims. Allow others to believe I have asked you to deliver the letter, and let them focus on you. Naturally, you do not need to do anything extra, and can just go about your life. But as a result, you will draw the attention of, if not the seraphim, then definitely the angels. I cannot deny that even this might carry some risks, but it is unlikely they will proactively try to harm you. The most likely scenario is that they will just try to warn or intimidate you. Even if you deny being asked to deliver a letter on my behalf, they likely won't believe you. If they won't believe me if I deny their claims, why do you even need to form an agreement with me? Wouldn't it be more beneficial for you if you don't make an agreement with me, and let them think that I'm delivering the letter on your behalf? That way, you don't need to pay me anything and get the benefit anyway." Shireen shook her beautiful head. "I am not so insincere as that. Such demeanor does not yield long-term, beneficial relationships, and will also affect my reputation, which will affect my ability to network in the resort. Moreover, if we do not form an agreement, we will not develop any contractual karma. It will be easy for anyone to see there is no agreement between us, for our causality will not reflect it. However, if we do form an agreement, the presence of that contractual karma in itself will become the greatest point of suspicion. Even if someone can read the line of karma and detect what it's about, there will always be doubt. For my purposes of diverting attention, that will be enough. Lex leaned back and thought about it for a moment. He didn't mind doing her the favor just to help out, but things were complicated now. Every action and inaction would inadvertently link him to various interest groups. He was already linked to the humanoid alliance just based on being born a human. He also could not deny ties to the Henali just based on the fact that his stay at the resort had been sponsored by them. The Versailles Bank was also linked to him. He also had some level of an antagonistic relationship with the HOA, and apparently they would plot to kill him over the next many centuries. Things were complicated enough, and every time he dealt with a situation like this one, he was further creating ties. The one benefit to all of this was that lately he had been doing a lot of things as Lex, for himself, thereby creating karma for himself. It was nowhere near enough to balance out his karma, despite receiving heaven's guidance, but it was a start. He also had to think about what he had to gain from such a deal, and while Shireen's favor was a nice thing to have, Lex had much more urgent needs. "I can accept this deal," Lex said. "But I need a few things from you then. More specifically, I need you to source some things for me, and I'll find a way to go collect them myself." Lex sent forward a crystal, engraved with a list of all the things he needed. Lex had not been greedy with his list, he merely listed some of the items he needed to upgrade his butter knife, as well as some items he needed to create a heaven back at the inn. Since Lex did not yet know how to create a hell, he would have to wait a bit for that. "That's quite a list," Shireen said with surprise. "Some of these items, I haven't even heard of. Others cannot be found so easily out in the wild, and usually belong to some force." "Well, you are asking me to indirectly interfere in the internal politics of a major race. I think this is more than fair. Besides, I told you that I'll retrieve the items myself. You just need to source them." "That's fair. How can I contact you once I've compiled the list?" This was a bit of an issue, since he was planning on sealing the inn to realms besides the origin realm. How did people get anything done without universal teleportation at their beck and call? "You can have the list sent to the Henali within the origin realm. They will be able to deliver it to me in the Midnight Inn." Chapter 15:14 Where is Hell? "Then we have an accord," Shireen said, holding out her hand. Lex shook it, expecting some kind of technique to take hold or something. Instead, it was just a good old-fashioned handshake. Even so, he could almost feel an additional karmic link between him and Shireen. The only reason Lex was able to sense even that was because he had already been studying contractual karma. "How long do you think it will take you to compile the list?" Lex asked. "A few items I can inform you of right now, but for most, I will need to reach out to various sources. A rough estimate is that it will take me about a dozen years, at the very least. How much longer it takes depends on how rare these items are." Lex resisted the urge to grimace. Time flowed 3 times slower here than in the origin realm, and time flowed 3 times slower there than in the midnight realm. In essence, it would take a long time one way or another. Without any prompting, Shireen made a list of the items, the locations of which she knew, and handed them over to Lex. Predictably, all of them had to do with heavens. Now all Lex needed to do was figure out how he was going to get them. Doing so personally was an option, but it would take an unnecessarily long time, and he was on the clock. He could get his workers to go fetch them, and yet he was hesitant to do so because it would involve unforeseen dangers. He could host a trial, and send his guests on fetch quests of sorts, but there was no guarantee that they would not take those treasures for themselves and would actually come back with them. Even if he offered a reward for the treasures, there was no guarantee that once someone got their hands on the treasures, they would actually turn them in. "It was a pleasure," said Lex as he put the list away. "I wish you luck with your granddaughter." "Likewise, may you have luck hunting down your treasures." Lex bid the angel baddies farewell, and quickly went to Lykanderov, who was holding a small, square box. The brimming dream lotus is safely sealed within this one-time use container, and can stay in there for about 3 years without suffering any harm. Before then, you will need to find a suitable environment for it, preferably one rich with divine energy, or else it will begin to wilt fairly quickly. Thanks, I know just where to put it, said Lex, who was going to hand the box to the turtle and let him deal with the headache of planting it. There were a few spots within the inn where there was divine energy, such as the fire temple specifically prepared for deities, so he wasn't too worried. Besides, the world seed lotus, probably now called a realm seed lotus or something along those lines for accuracy, would also take care of the new lotus. Lex was about to leave, since everything was in order, but couldn't help but stall for a moment. There was one question, possibly an arbitrary one, that he couldn't help but wonder about. If you don't mind, there's a question I'd like to ask you, Lex said. Go ahead. I'd be happy to answer if I can, Lycanderoth answered. The seraphim was still studying Lex, somewhat. Although he had gotten a sense for how ridiculous Lex was personally, planning a military operation had little to do with personal strength and more was a test of tactics. He had yet to see the brilliance that allowed him to plan such an excellent operation, though that only made sense. Who would display all their strengths out in the open for the world to see? That space you told me about, the space that constitutes the true universe, or whatever. Does it have a name? I can't just keep calling it the true universe. Lycanderoth's casual smile slowly faded, and an unusual expression replaced it. He looked solemn, and at the same time exasperated. It does, indeed, have a name. In fact, it has many names, but the one it is most commonly known by is. Lycanderoth let out a deep sigh before he answered, as if the name of that place itself was the source of many of his headaches. That place is called heaven. To be more accurate, it is the first heaven, and the only true heaven. It is the land of miracles, and it is, ironically, one of the most dangerous places that exists within the universe. Lex did not immediately answer, for that truly made no sense. So wait, is there a true hell as well? Or a first hell? He asked. Well, yes, everyone thinks so, but as far as I know, there is no real consensus on its existence. Many people just believe that the void is hell. So what? All of our realms, major and minor, are all just hanging in hell? That doesn't make sense. Although, as inhospitable as it is, I'd see why people consider it to be hell. That also explains why the void dwellers want to escape it. Wait, does that mean sinners, after they die, go to the void? Does that mean those who do good deeds end up in the first heaven? Lycanderoth sighed again, as if he was reliving a very tedious bane of his existence. No, there are no sentient living beings inherently in the first heaven. And no, I don't know what happens after death. Please, I think you should put the topic of the first heaven to rest. It does you no good to dwell on it now that you no longer have a connection to it. With that Lex nodded, though he was more confused about things than before he asked the question. Why was the true universe, or the actual universe, or the physical space of the universe called heaven? In fact, he still hadn't wrapped his head around the existence of the universe itself as a realm yet either, so everything else was a struggle as well. Chapter 1515 Sincere Request. Lex thought about the matter for a while, but came to one solid conclusion. The universe was weird as heck, and there was no need to try and figure out its secrets right now. More importantly, while Lycanderoth seemed distraught at the lost opportunity to access the first heaven through Lex himself didn't care. His one and only priority was taking care of the inn, and getting involved with others who had their own agendas was a huge distraction from that. Thanks for answering my questions, Lex said. I'll see you around. Lycanderoth smiled and bid Lex farewell, and then saw him teleport away. As soon as Lex vanished, so did his smile, and he pulled out a tablet and began to make notes on it. The document was filled with various other notes about Lex, including a very extensive character profile. Dangerously calculative, with his real agenda masked by a series of distracting actions. Between befriending Daffy and Shireen, and taking great advantage of the resort while suffering no personal expense, Lycanderoth was certain that Lex's true intentions at the resort had remained hidden. He had effortlessly created too many diversions, and dropped too many hints in casual conversation for him to be underestimated. He was an extremely formidable opponent, and yet that is exactly what Lykanderov expected from someone who ousted an entire terrorist organization for a mere personal vendetta. Even as a celestial immortal, in his home territory, he found it impossible to see through Lex's thoughts and intentions, especially when considering his early departure. Saving a few hours' worth of time in the resort seemed hardly worth it unless he was saving it for something critical. He wondered, the next time Lex came to the resort, would he reach out to Shireen, Daffy, or someone else entirely? Lykanderov put the tablet away. It hardly mattered what he did or didn't do, Lykanderov just wanted to learn from studying Lex. Meanwhile, Lex returned to the inn and took in a deep breath. No matter how comfortable the resort was, and it was great, there was just something about home that it couldn't beat. Still, Lex had to bring in 3 new features to the inn from the resort, yet that could wait. At that very moment, Z had finally reached the innkeeper's office, and was trudging through the hall, dealing with the additional weight that the hall put on anyone who tried to approach the office. Since he had made it this far already, it was no longer in Lex's domain to inquire about the issue. Rather, this was a part of the innkeeper's responsibility now. Lex could have just acted as the innkeeper through his projections, which held real power now, but he much preferred to do it in person. Lex changed into his host attire and teleported to his office, waiting patiently as Z dragged his feet across the hall. It needed no genius to tell that the reason he was so pressured was the scroll container he was carrying, and yet Lex could feel no power from it, as it was perfectly self-contained. It took him 4 hours to finally reach the innkeeper's door, and found it open when he did. "Come in," said the innkeeper warmly. "You have had a long journey." "Not at all," said Z, whose face was pale and covered in sweat. "It was my pleasure to carry this letter of intent to you. It was given to me by a guest who wishes to meet with you." The guest claimed to be in the Tao realm. Lex held out his hand, and the scroll flew over from Z to himself, though he refrained from actually touching it. The scroll merely hovered above his hand. "Thank you for delivering the letter. I will handle the matter from here, you should go get some rest. You've clearly overexerted yourself." "Thank you, I will do just that," said Z, who was all but ready to crash into bed. But, covered in sweat as he was, he wanted to go to a hot tub room first. Lex, meanwhile, kept half an eye on Z to make sure nothing abnormal happened to him. At the same time, he studied in the scroll container and wondered what to do with it. The last letter he received from a Tao Lord put a real strain on him. Naturally, he could not ignore the letter, and yet he hesitated to just go ahead and read it either. Unfortunately, there was no recourse for him in this matter. "I should really look into getting some kind of letter-reading glasses for the innkeeper," he muttered, and took out the innkeeper's letter opener. The system had already provided him with a number of other tools, so a pair of reading glasses for the innkeeper didn't seem impossible. Not that it would have any real effect on the situation, Lex still readied himself by manifesting his domination as much as possible, and putting his body in its peak state. Realistically, if the host attire could not protect him from the aura of the letter, then his own power would be of little consequence. Even so, he waited till he felt absolutely ready, and then tapped the container with the letter opener. Instead of opening to reveal the letter within, the container itself morphed into a scroll that rolled open before him. In a single glance, Lex read the whole thing and looked away, not taking any risks. The letter was short and concise. To the innkeeper. "I have tasted your hospitality and found it wonderfully refreshing. I wanted nothing more than to quietly enjoy my vacation, and avoid a confrontation for as long as possible. Yet circumstances conspire against my wishes, and I have been put into a situation where clarification is required. It is with sincere intent that I request a meeting so pretenses can be dropped, and the matters of great importance that we have been avoiding can be discussed. Regards. Sun Wukong." Chapter 15-16 Handsome Monkey King. Lex had once sealed his memory of Wukong's name from within the Chamber of Secrets, but upon reading it again, suddenly those memories returned to him, once again reminding him of how dangerous his interactions with this particular guest were. He had to be in complete control over his thoughts, lest his thoughts be seen by the guest. The worst part was, he wasn't sure if the host attire would protect him from the guest's gaze, for the system seemed entirely incapable of detecting this particular guest at all. It was uncanny. But it provided Lex with a proper justification to meet with this particular guest, which was convenient because he had already decided to meet him. If there were potentially other Tao lords hunting this guest, then it would be inconvenient to keep him here for a long time. Although the system teleportation was sealed outside the origin realm, and the location of his realm was hidden and masked, who knew what capabilities Tao lords had? It was best to be careful. Lex carefully placed the letter in the same drawer as the one with the previous one, burying it with many of his business cards. Although this particular letter had not harmed him, Sun Wukong, I am glad to know that you enjoyed the hospitality of the Midnight Inn, the innkeeper said, his voice ever pleasing and comforting to hear. When he began to speak, his office was empty save himself, and yet as his words completed, a dignified monkey sat opposite to him. Wukong stared openly at the innkeeper, unknown thoughts running through his head. Heck, he might have been inspecting the innkeeper, yet Lex could not tell. In the presence of other Tao lords, his system would suppress itself, hiding its presence as best as it could, and allow everything to run on automation. Yet, even as this particular guest, whose name Lex refused to think of, sat before him, his system showed no such indication of hiding. The renowned innkeeper, Wukong eventually spoke, interest shining in his eyes. I have heard many things about you. It is said that you boast an incomparable mastery over karma. Seeing you now, seemingly without any karmic ties at all save for the inn, I see that is true. The innkeeper smiled and nodded politely, as if acknowledging the compliment. I have also heard much about you, dear guest, the innkeeper spoke, his tone and pace at ease, as if the monkey's vast reputation did not bother him at all. I have heard you like to be called Handsome Monkey King. Wukong had his left elbow rested peacefully on the arm of his chair, using it to support himself as he rested his jaw on his fist. Yet when the innkeeper spoke of the nickname he liked to be called, Wukong's elbow slipped, and the Tao Lord almost fell over from a seated position. The innkeeper did not react to the sudden stumble, and Wukong also did not acknowledge it, yet Lex suspected that the guest was suppressing a blush from appearing. Yes, well, I have that going for me too, though I'd have thought that from the many things my reputation is built on, that is not what you would be focusing on. Lex refused to believe that a Tao Lord could be flustered so easily. There was just no way. Yes, well, I have also heard that you are accepting blind date suggestions from Brandon. Quite courageous of you, if I might say so myself. I'm glad that you are making use of the inn's environment to explore your romantic options. How is that going for you? Wukong suddenly looked like he had been shot through the heart, though it only lasted a moment. Lex refused to believe that the being before him was so openly displaying his genuine emotions, and believed that they were being used to throw him off guard. Wukong, meanwhile, recalled that the innkeeper, even without meeting him, had once dissuaded him from trying to go on a blind date. Had the innkeeper foreseen that he would be dumped? I was merely trying out a new experience. It's nothing to take too seriously, Wukong said nonchalantly. You know, before I came to the inn, I looked into you. I suppose you could have already guessed as much. With no history and no mark left on the universe, it seems you appeared out of nowhere. I suppose with your mastery of karma, it is not difficult to erase all your traces. But I also heard that lately, you have reduced your appearances in public. I was wondering why that might be. I see now it is because you are nursing a grave wound. If I had to guess, I would say you are at about 40% of your regular strength. Quite impressive what you can do in such a state. If I had been so weakened, I would never expose myself. Lex suddenly had a thought, though he could not believe such a thought to be true. He pushed it aside. How was it possible that a Tao Lord could have such weak verbal confrontational skills? If he looked over their conversation, it seemed apparent at a glance that the guest sitting opposite to him was trying to unnerve him, yet his attempts kept failing. As such, he took to attacking his more personal traits. What was interesting was that the guest seemed to be considering the system's wounded state as the innkeeper's own. To be more specific, the system was at 40.2% functionality, and the guest, who had clearly tried to observe the innkeeper, mistook the system's weakened state as the innkeeper's own. Lex did not know what the guest's intentions were, but this was no time to lose his nerve. He would continue to act as if everything the guest was showing was purposeful to deceive him. He just couldn't believe there existed such a simple and straightforward Tao Lord. Chapter 15-17 Precautionary Measures. Even though the guest in front of him was using a very blatant and obvious method to try to provoke him, Lex continued to maintain an at-ease demeanor. The innkeeper's persona of someone who was very calm and had everything under control could not be broken. "I think you are under some kind of misunderstanding, dear guest. I am but a humble innkeeper, managing my inn and taking care of my guests. Why would something like that require strength? The only reason I have taken a step back, for now, is to allow the inn workers to mature a bit and gain some experience. Though the midnight inn caters to the whole universe, for now we are limited to this little corner, taking on only a few guests so that the inn may prepare itself for when we open properly. I suppose you could say the inn, currently, is in its soft launch phase." Wukong snorted. "You have two sovereigns, a newborn realm, the highest concentration of human talent available in the entire universe, two potential Tao lords and a worker who is all but ready to discover his Tao, limited only by his realm, and you say you don't need strength? I have never heard anything so absurd. Are you so confident in yourself that you did not react at all when the universe's most infamous thief comes waltzing in like nothing? You did not even react when I distributed the Jade Emperor's wine to all the guests of the inn? You do know that he will be able to detect those who have drunk his wine the moment they leave the inn. He may say nothing to them, but he will certainly follow the trail of where they got that wine. Was he the universe's most infamous thief? That explained why he was wanted." Lex didn't know who this Jade Emperor was, but considering that as a Tao Lord this guest was concerned about him, then he was also probably some Tao Lord with immense influence. If he was infamous for stealing, then that probably wasn't the only thing he stole. He had also clearly scouted out the inn for valuables, and though Lex could guess the identity of the potential Tao Lords, he had no idea who he was referring to when he mentioned a worker all but ready to discover his Tao. In fact, he may have already stolen some things from the inn, and Lex would have no way of knowing since the system couldn't detect him at all. Though, to a degree, Lex got an idea for why the system couldn't detect him. As the universe's most infamous thief, it was obvious that he would have some amazing methods to prevent himself from being detected by anyone or anything. "I only know you as the guest who hangs out with Brandon, and started a week-long party at the inn. As long as you don't break the rules of the inn, why would I be concerned with your reputation? More than me, it seems you are bothered by a lack of reaction on my part. Why don't you tell me why the universe's most infamous thief has joined a book club at the Midnight Inn?" During the short period of their conversation, Lex had swept the inn, and though he had been unable to detect the guest in front of him, he could pay special attention to people's conversations regarding him. Through that, he had gotten a general idea of what this guest had been doing at the inn the last few months, at least publicly. "You," Wukong said, but seemed unable to say anything more. He seemed visibly frustrated, not that Lex believed any of it was true. Eventually, he just sighed. "Are you already in contact with her? Is that why you're so nonchalant? Do you already know my identity?" Wukong asked, one question after another. The innkeeper, to Wukong's immense frustration, raised a simple eyebrow in curiosity. "I am not sure what you are talking about," he said, further cementing his image as an overall very chill guy. Yet the more calm and friendly the innkeeper appeared to be, the more Wukong felt annoyed and frustrated. Ever since he had stolen the peaches of immortality back when he was just a mortal monkey, he had hardly ever come across such a friendly person, at least as long as they knew who he was. In that case, the reason Wukong felt frustrated was, if only he had discovered the innkeeper sooner, he would not have gone through so much of life without any friends. In the end, Wukong simply sighed in defeat. There was no point in probing him any further, for he wouldn't detect anything anyway. Wukong was more of a fighter than a talker anyway. Slowly, a seriousness mixed into Wukong's eyes. He spread his aura around the room, completely isolating it from the outside. Although the system still seemed unable to detect anything the guest in front of him did, Lex himself could feel that he had been isolated within his office for one very simple reason: he was once again cut off from Jack, or basically anything outside his office. In fact, even his system seemed unable to sweep through the inn, though it was still operating as if everything was fine. Since you asked me, well, you asked me why I joined the book club, but it's close enough to asking me why I have come to the inn, so it's time we got down to business. I hope you do not mind me isolating your office. What we discuss here needs to stay a secret. I assure you, my office is secure enough on its own, but if it makes you more comfortable, then you can use your own measures for safety, the innkeeper said calmly, as if he was completely unperturbed by the sudden display of power. Internally, Lex spoke to Mary. Hey Mary, are you still there? Yes, I am, she said, though she didn't appear anywhere in sight. But I closed all external senses the moment your meeting started. If anyone other than you hears your guest's words, he may detect it, so I have no way of knowing what's going on. Do not tell me what happens in this meeting. You will need to use your own discretion to determine how to proceed. Do let me know when the meeting is over so I can unblock my senses though. Got it. Stay put, I'll handle this, said Lex. He did not allow himself to feel nervous, even though the host attire prevented any of his emotions from showing. He didn't even dare go into the state of flow. Anything and everything could serve as a hint to the Tao Lord in front of him, who seemed more formidable than any of the previous Tao beings he had ever met before. As such, he quite firmly and thoroughly took control over all his actions and emotions. He didn't even allow himself to wonder if he would need to be decontaminated from Tao Aura once more. I am sure that your security measures are adequate, but it doesn't hurt to be careful. The matters I need to discuss are secrets of the highest order. As if to emphasize that exact thing, Wukong pulled out a small treasure that looked like a gold Buddha statue, and placed it on the table between him and the innkeeper. From the Buddha's head incense smoke started to rise and began swirling around the two of them, creating yet another barrier around them, further isolating them. During the entire process, the innkeeper remained entirely unperturbed, watching with a soft smile on his face. The innkeeper's unwavering confidence, despite the situation, was quite impressive, and Wukong raised his evaluation of the innkeeper by a few levels. Maybe the weakness that he had detected, the one that said that the innkeeper was only at 40% of his maximum strength, was something the innkeeper had purposefully revealed as a facade. Regardless, it did not matter. Wukong continued to make a few more preparations, and Lex watched silently, not allowing a single emotional fluctuation. At one point, through his tenet, Lex even detected that the laws around them had suddenly changed. It almost felt like they had been transported inside an entirely different realm altogether, yet that wasn't possible. The host attire would not have worked if they had left the Midnight Realm. Now then, I think we can talk frankly, said Wukong, looking much more at ease with his various protections in place. I'll get right to it. I did not come to the Midnight Inn by coincidence, nor did I come here to enjoy a leisurely vacation, although that has been a pleasant experience that I more than welcome. I came here because I was sent here by Mother Nuwa. Chapter 1518 Cooperation. Wukong stared at the innkeeper, waiting for his reaction to the news. What Wukong had just revealed to the innkeeper was a secret of astounding proportions that, if revealed, could shift the entire balance of power in the entire universe. Wars would be fought, realms would exchange hands, entire races would go extinct or rise up to power. Yet the insufferable innkeeper merely nodded, as if he was waiting for the story to continue. Aren't you surprised? Wukong finally asked, unable to hold back. The whole universe is speculating whether the mother is alive or dead. She has not openly acted or appeared for entire ages, making her current status one of the greatest mysteries of the universe. Are you not surprised to hear that she personally gave me such a command? Me, a beast, a thief, with no affiliation to the humanoid alliance or even the path of order, got a direct order from her. Are you not surprised? The innkeeper's smile widened ever so slightly, before he calmly spoke. I do not usually concern myself with things happening outside my inn, or the affiliations of my guests. but I am pleased to hear that the mother expressed an interest in my inn. If she ever needs to rest or take a vacation, we would be most honored to host her." Wukong wanted to rip his own hair out, but refrained from doing that. What kind of an answer was that? How could he be so indifferent? Wukong stopped thinking about it, and instead just focused on the discussion. Anyway, like I was saying, I was sent here by the mother. She had taken notice of the inn already. As a bastion of human talent, it could not escape her sight. But recently, things took a drastic change. I do not know the exact details, but the reason she sent me here was to serve as a protector for one particular worker at your inn. Oh? Is there a particular danger to one of my workers that I don't know about? The innkeeper asked, finally showing some emotion on his face. But even then, it seemed more like mere interest rather than deep concern. As far as I know, not really. More importantly, no one can know that I am here to protect a particular guest. I must protect him in silence, and if anything were to happen to him or the inn, then I have been ordered to save him. I do not understand. If there is no real threat, what's the point of sending you? More importantly, from what I understand, you have not been very covert about your presence here. Certain entities may already be on their way here to confront you. Wouldn't that mean attracting attention towards the inn, instead of away from it? You're bringing more danger to your target, from what I can see. I am naturally not here with my real body, so you do not need to worry. No one will waste any real effort in trying to catch one of my clones, not to mention I have already spread thousands of my clones in other public areas across the universe. It is not worth the hassle of offending me just to capture one of my clones, that too from this inn while there are countless clones available in numerous easier to reach areas. In such a situation, my presence here will actually keep needless trouble away. I must admit, in the beginning, the reason I revealed myself was to test your response. Even now, I cannot see your intentions in gathering so many humans and having them work under you. What is the point of having so many devils as guests? You tread a dangerous line, and you do it so openly. Personally, it was my intention to maintain the status quo for as long as possible. Even the mother made no mention of you, so I wasn't sure if you could be trusted. But then I saw Xeric sword arts come back to life in the hands of one of your workers, and then I finally noticed. It was hidden from view, but if you know what to look for, it was easy to determine. Almost all of your workers are clones of the first few generations of humans. Being clones is not enough to give them the same talents and skills as the original, but you have somehow elevated their personal talents and potentials to such a large degree, all so silently and openly, yet somehow without arousing any attention. Within your inn, I saw the seed sowed of the return of the human race to the peak of the realm. At that point, no matter what your intentions, even if you are raising them just for the sake of having good workers for your inn, I could no longer ignore you. I think it would be best if we come to some kind of understanding, and actually work together. As long as my connection to the mother is not revealed, it is not impossible for us to cooperate on certain things. I appreciate the effort you've taken into protecting one of my workers, but you have not exactly told me who it is you're supposed to be protecting, and why they need protection. Furthermore, I don't see how learning of a sword technique that Z learned forced you to reveal all this to me, or what it is you want to cooperate on. How can I not have this conversation with you after learning about Xeric's sword technique? Before their fall, humans were one of the most industrious and militaristic races in existence, posing a grave threat to the enemies of the humanoid alliance. Learning of their imminent return on a universal timescale means that I either stand to benefit or suffer a loss based on my affiliations. This is a very real potential threat that no one can ignore. After all, the easiest time to kill a Dao Lord is before they become a Dao Lord, and merely show the potential to be one. Of course, a handful of talented humans are not going to change the fate of the universe on their own, but if they can raise the ranking for humans on the cosmic ascendance spectrum, then universe-wide talented humans can begin to take advantage of the difference. As for the exact identity of the worker I am to protect, I think, for various reasons, it is best if I do not specify. You can rest assured that I will not interfere in their duties or daily life, and will carry out my protective duties in silence, without raising any suspicion. A large part of that will be by just making the environment of the inn safer. I know that you are not interested, or at least, do not seem interested in the affairs of the universe at large, but that does not mean those from the universe are not interested in you. Your reputation is too fresh, and largely untested. Even if you have the ability to protect yourself, others don't know that, so they will try to probe you. But, with me around at the inn, there's no Tao Lord who'd be willing to enter the inn. After all, it's a well-known fact that I will steal something from any Tao Lord that I meet. Just my reputation alone will keep the majority of all Tao Lords away from your inn. I suppose that's not the best thing for business, so I apologize in advance. As to your last question, even I do not know why I need to protect my target, and from what threat. All I know is that if the mother has deemed him worthy of protection, then there must be something spectacularly significant about him. In fact, it is entirely possible that he alone can cause the return of the human race to its former peak. The innkeeper gave Wukong a perturbed look. It's not very nice of you to scare away potential guests, although I suppose you're technically not breaking any rules of the inn if your mere presence here is causing other Tao Lords to stay away. Moving on, I find it a little absurd that you're here to protect one of my workers, but don't want to reveal the identity of who you're trying to protect. I suppose as long as you do not disrupt any inactivities, it is not a big deal. Finally, if you want to cooperate with the Midnight Inn, it is not something I am averse to. But first we need to discuss the exact details of what that cooperation entails. What exactly do you want from the Midnight Inn, as a part of your cooperation, and what exactly are you willing to offer? I must emphasize this strictly before we discuss any matters. The workers of the inn, no matter their race or how talented they are absolutely not available for some kind of race reclamation mission. I will not be sending them to fight any wars, nor am I going to be sending them to any missions unaffiliated to the inn. However, if you want them to host an event or plan a party, then we can talk. Chapter 1519 Primordial Garden. Although Lex remained largely unaware of the ramifications of the projection of the pair of eyes that appeared during his breakthrough to the immortal realm, he was not completely unaware. In fact, it was basically impossible to not hear about the pair of eyes that appeared all across the universe, any place a humanoid race existed, and somehow caused them to experience an elevation in talent of some sort. Or, well, in Lex's case, he didn't hear about the whole universe, but he'd heard enough about it. The rumors existed in his inn, as well as inside the Origin Realm and even the Crystal Realm. That was enough to give him some idea of what the projection caused by his breakthrough had done. The rise in talent was minor, almost inconsequential. But the scale was absolutely unbelievable, which was the true reason there was endless gossip about it. More importantly, the effect of the projection was identical to the effect of his physique. As such, when the guest in front of him refused to reveal the identity of who he was supposed to protect, Lex was still fairly certain that it was him. Although one could ask how anyone could discover that the projection had been caused by Lex, considering that Nuwa was supposed to be the patron of the humanoid alliance, and the true source of its power, he wasn't too surprised by it. If he had to guess, just based on the random bits of information he could easily say that she was probably above the Tao Lord level. Or perhaps even 2 or 3 realms above that, if such realms even existed. Who could really say? If anything, his recent experiences had informed him of how little he really understood about the universe. While Tao Lords appeared to be the largest and most powerful force any organization could have, that was just on the surface. If even he could get in touch with this level of information, then the secrets those very organizations held surely had something to do with a level above Tao Lord, right? If anything, his recent experiences had informed him of how little he really understood about the universe. While Tao Lords appeared to be the largest and most powerful force any organization could have, that was just on the surface. If even he could get in touch with this level of information, then the secrets those very organizations held surely had something to do with a level above Tao Lord, right? Regardless, Lex was fairly certain that the patron, or founder, or creator of the humanoid alliance, whatever the mother's official position was interested in protecting him because of his ability to improve the talent for all humanoid races. Although Lex hardly ever made use of his physique, for obvious reasons, he couldn't even imagine how powerful it would become as he grew stronger. If he ever managed to enter the Tao realm, he could only begin to speculate how drastic the effect of the subsequent projection would be. Maybe he could, single-handedly, raise the level of humans on the cosmic ascendance spectrum by a vast margin. In fact, he could not even begin to imagine the kind of karma that would involve. What Lex couldn't begin to guess, however, was who the worker was who was all but ready to discover his Tao. If he really had to guess, he'd say Gawain, since he was really into swordsmanship and was, himself, a sword. But somehow, he doubted it. It couldn't be that easy. Fret not. I do not need an army of humans for any purpose. In fact, it is in my best interest to ensure that they continue to grow and thrive in a safe and secure environment. As such, I cannot help but think that they are already too exposed. After all, if I can stumble onto Z using a long-forgotten sword technique, then so can others. The ideal situation would be if they were completely hidden from view. Barring that, since I have a feeling you would not want to replace all of your workers overnight, it would be best to make them as inconspicuous as possible. One of the best ways to do that would be to begin hiring another, very conspicuous race as workers at your inn. In case it was not clear, the innkeeper said, immediately taking advantage of a slight pause in Wukong's speech. The Midnight Inn does not utilize any form of bonded or coerced labor. Just as the innkeeper said that, he was reminded of the two rhino centaurs, who were literally being forced to work at the inn in exchange for their restricted freedom. At least, the inn does not partake in such things unless the target is someone who has actively acted against the inn by breaking multiple significant rules. Wukong smiled mischievously. Yes, I understand. I've seen the kind of environment you built here. It's rare for such a large number of beings to foster such familial feelings for one another, yet you have somehow created exactly such a place that enables that. I doubt that's the kind of thing you'd want to compromise. But what if I told you that there's a race out there who would make excellent workers for your inn, and they wouldn't compromise the environment you built either? If anything, they'd fit right in perfectly. I would not be averse to giving them an opportunity to take the test to become an employee, said the innkeeper calmly. Whether they can grasp the opportunity or not would be, ultimately, up to them. Naturally, there wouldn't be any backdoors opened for them. Wukong resisted the urge to grimace as he maintained his mischievous smile. This accursed innkeeper. He was not playing by the script. Shouldn't he ask what this race was, or how he could find them? Tell me, innkeeper, have you ever heard of the primordial garden? Wukong proceeded to ask. As a matter of fact, I have, was all the innkeeper said. Lex immediately thought back to the crystal realm, where he had heard of the primordial garden. The crystal realm was limited to the earth immortal realm, and it was all but impossible to break through a higher realm. But, as with almost everything else in the universe, there could be exceptions under special circumstances. If anyone broke through the earth immortal realm and entered the heavenly immortal realm, they would ascend from the crystal realm to the primordial garden, an entirely different realm. From what he recalled, the crystal race had some kind of influence there as well. Chapter 1520 Kirin Race. Within the Artica realm, Axios finally concluded a meeting that had been going on for days. He had not reached the exact resolution that he was hoping for, but things were on a positive track. If everything went according to plan, then he would be invited by the Artica race to participate in the more exclusive portions of the New Age Expo, which is where the Nas would begin their true plan. Free from the meeting, he did not allow himself to rest, and instead turned his attention to the other matter that had been occupying his attention. He oversaw the Go board, and received a lot more information from it than his opponent would. To begin with, he already knew the relevance of each level of the board, and exactly what he needed to do to gain an advantage. Yet, because of his system, he could also glean some information about his opponent, a clear advantage that his opponent lacked. Unlike all his previous opponents while playing the game, this one had learned of the existence of the board fairly quickly, and had even somewhat gained some level of control over the pieces. Axios could tell, for he could see that the opponent had accumulated a number of beads which he was not deploying. This could be considered a decent strategy, depending on what the opponent wanted to do. Clearly, it also prevented him from being targeted by Axios' rook piece as well. But sometimes, not placing pieces could also be a disadvantage, for it could allow Axios to take key areas. Of course, what the opponent's strategy was, Axios did not know yet. What he did know was that this opponent was already proving to be far more formidable than his previous opponents even this early in the game. That's exactly why it was fun to play, and exactly why Axios wanted to pull out all the stops. He had previously used a perk that his system gave him. The perk gave him a hint as to a good time to disrupt his opponent's flow, and it had given him the hint a short while ago. The hint was not too accurate, but it was close enough. The short amount of time wasted in exiting the meeting should not have made too much of a difference. Axios sacrificed some of the ordinary pieces he had accumulated, and summoned another rook piece, sending it onto the board and crushing one of his opponent's pieces. Whether his opponent realized it or not, one of the core principles of the game was the accumulation of soft and hard power. Whether that came in the form of accumulating allies, affiliations, knowledge, personal strength, or anything else, it was all relevant if it was of a sufficient amount, keeping the both of them in mind. As such, a key point of the game was disrupting each other in key moments, preventing them from grasping opportunities. The consequences of this game were very, very real. Axios smirked to himself as he watched the opponent's piece get crushed, and then diverted his attention away from the board. Right now, his opponent was surely experiencing another form of cultivation deviation. Yet what Axios hadn't accounted for were two key things. When he received the hint was exactly when Lex's meeting with Wukong began. If he had deployed the rook piece at that exact time, the result really may have been something unexpected. Yet as a result of the time difference, the few seconds Axios waited before acting resulted in more than enough time in the Midnight Realm for Wukong to set up his barriers. Even the Midnight Inn system suffered as a result of Wukong's barriers, let alone any other system. The effect of the rook piece did not reach Lex, for the go board in his mind was isolated from Axios' system. Unaware that he had inadvertently avoided disaster by hurrying to investigate Z's behavior and then meet Wukong, Lex waited for his guest to explain the relevance of mentioning the primordial garden. Of course, you've heard of the primordial garden. Everyone has heard of the primordial garden. It's the one realm Ventura has a monopoly over because no one else can find its location. Just imagine it. A vivarium of sorts of the primordial age in the form of a realm, forever stuck at the peak of the celestial realm. Its inability to fully mature limits the actions and access of Dao lords, and yet it contains races, plants, treasures all long extinct in the universe since the end of the primordial age itself. You asked me, Innkeeper, what I want from you, and what I can do for you. I've heard that you can access any place in the universe through your inn. I want your help in reaching the primordial garden, and in exchange, I can aid you in earning the favor of the Kirin race, one of the elder races, and take them on as workers for your inn. It's not every day that an opportunity to hire one of the top 100 races from the cosmic ascendance spectrum just appears right in front of you, so what do you say? The Kirin race, as I'm sure you know, were well known for their enlightened and hospitable culture. They can be found nowhere other than the primordial garden in the entire universe, so if they start working at the inn, they would far outshadow your other workers, perfectly hiding your human workers in plain sight. Lex did not immediately answer, even if he had no idea how he would ever gain access to the primordial garden to begin with. He'd just received a lot of information, and he needed to carefully process all of it, lest he miss something important. As such, he accelerated the speed of his thoughts, going through a million different possibilities each second. The first thing that occurred to him was that if Ventura had a monopoly on the primordial garden, that could be one of the reasons they had one of their schools try to take over the crystal realm. Chapter 1521 To offend or not to offend. The potential motives of Ventura aside, what was more important was the news that Ventura had a monopoly on the primordial garden. Lex had learned long ago that anything with the word primordial in its name was hella special. If this was a video game, the primordial descriptor would be equivalent to a grade, or even several grades above legendary, whether the ranking be for items, places, beings, or anything else. If Ventura had a monopoly on the primordial garden, was that really something he wanted to mess with? Even if he had the guest in front of him as a deterrent, Lex had not forgotten that when he completed the quest related to Pfardy's wedding, one of the things that upgraded his reward was the presence of a projection above the Tao realm. With no other information at hand, Lex could only assume that the projection of the being above the Tao realm was associated with Ventura. With absolutely no information on hand about what came after the Tao realm, Lex could only guess that whoever that projection belonged to was on the same level as, or close to being on the same level as Mother Nuwa. Was such a being someone Lex really wanted to mess with, in any conceivable way? No, not at all. Not under any circumstances. Not even if the system somehow forced or coerced him. Sure, having a race in the top 100 races on the cosmic ascendance spectrum, apparently known as the Elder Races, was tempting. But just like he had forsaken the temptation of the Bangle of Narn so long ago, Lex would not provoke death just to get some benefits he could live without. A tempting offer, no doubt, said the innkeeper with a warm smile, giving away none of his thoughts. But let's assume for a moment I can access the primordial garden, without any hint as to its location or any way of targeting it. You yourself said that the garden is under a monopoly of Ventura. If I start recruiting the Kirin race, won't it practically announce to the universe that I have broken Ventura's monopoly? Although the inn keeps to itself and does not mind what others are doing out in the universe, that does not mean that the inn is entirely indifferent to the universe itself. Offending a power like Ventura does not really align with the inn's status as neutral. Wukong did not immediately respond. Instead, he widened his mischievous smile. Although what the innkeeper said sounded perfectly logical, it was actually the first time the innkeeper had actually adhered to common sense, as far as he was concerned. It was good to know that the innkeeper was still not indifferent even to Ventura. That was a behemoth that was able to take on students from every single race and power in the universe, without being swayed or affected by the pressure of any power. It was a power that was neutral by force, because no one really wanted to offend it, and everyone wanted to get on its good side. Yet earning its appreciation was entirely dependent on Ventura itself. If the innkeeper remained indifferent even to Ventura, then Wukong would have had to re-evaluate the innkeeper entirely. Yes, on the surface it really does seem like that would be the case. But I happened to learn some secrets that I just borrowed from some charitable friends I encountered during my many travels. Would you like to know? Are you basing your entire plan on some secrets that you stole? The innkeeper asked, an amused tone in his voice, rather than skeptical. That seems to me like Ventura would be even more provoked if they found out. Are you sure your intentions are as you claim? Wukong chuckled. As the universe's greatest thief, items and belongings are not the only things I steal. Anything you can imagine, from emotions, to memories, to fragments of Tao, or even enlightenments, to imagination itself, all are fair game. As it happens, amongst my collection, I have more than a few memories about the primordial garden. My understanding of that place exceeds even many elders of Ventura itself. That place is not without an owner, and Ventura only operates there with the owner's permission. If others are to find it, Ventura has no grounds upon which to express dissatisfaction. In fact, it is only a matter of time before someone else finds it. It is entirely impossible to maintain such a monopoly forever. As long as the owner does not have an issue with you or the inn, there will be no real obstacle to you connecting to the primordial garden. Having no grounds to express dissatisfaction does not mean they won't take offense, or won't be dissatisfied, said the innkeeper, yet even as he said it, Lex knew he had stumbled onto a genuine issue he would have to face one day. Since the system was to cater to the entire universe, connecting to the whole universe was an inevitability. Yet there was no reason to rush into it before he was ready. So what you're basically saying is that, if I can confirm that Ventura will not take offense to you reaching out to the primordial garden, then you would be open to reaching out to it. You're also ignoring the fact that I have no hint as to its location, but setting that aside, if reaching out to it won't affect the inn's neutral status, then there is no real issue. You know what, while we're here, let's tackle that issue as well. What would you need to locate the garden? Lex had never actively tried to connect to a new realm before. He would, at the very least, need to buy some very expensive kind of ticket. To target the realm, he probably also needed to find an object from the realm carrying its aura. There may even be more requirements, but he could not check right then and there. Operating the system in front of his guest was not a risk he could take, so he could only guess as to the requirements. To start off with, I would need an object from the primordial garden laden with the aura of the realm itself, and the stronger the aura, the better. Chapter 1522 Caught in the Act. An item from the realm, carrying the realm's aura? Wukong repeated, almost as if bewildered. In fact, there was even a somewhat shocked expression on his face. Is that all it would take? The truth was that Wukong really was shocked. If an item was all it took to trace back the location of a realm, then most realms would not remain hidden and out of reach. Most major forces used a combination of divination, calculation, void exploration and many other, very expensive means to even narrow down the general vicinity of a realm. Even the term general vicinity was relative, for even after accurately narrowing down the location of a realm, it was not uncommon to spend millions of years searching. For exactly that reason, Earth and heavenly immortals were often used as the menial labor in void exploration for realms and minor realms. Such was the irony of life. In a smaller organization of setting, a heavenly immortal was akin to an overlord and ruler due to their immense power. But in larger organizations, they were used as labor for that very power and their long lives. Of course, despite the difference in status, the payment and compensation of larger organizations was still better than that of an overlord of a smaller organization. Yes, that would be a good start, the innkeeper confirmed. If more is required, I can let you know. But that would be a discussion to have if I actually decide to connect to the primordial garden. For now, like I said, despite having the goal of connecting the inn to the entire universe, the inn is in a soft launch phase. Whether it's the inn itself, the inn's realm, of the inn's workers, they're all slowly maturing into their roles. I am in no rush to forcefully expedite things. Very well then. I will take responsibility for getting you confirmation that Ventura will not act against you for gaining access to the primordial garden, nor will it affect the relationship between your two institutions. Once that is done, we can look forward to reaping the harvest of the garden together. That is all well and good, Wukong, the innkeeper said with a warm smile, almost as if he was looking down at him like an adult looking down at a child. But let me remind you of something first. Whether we enter the garden or not is yet to be seen, but for such a day to come, and for you to continuously stay at the inn to conduct your protective duties, you need to be able to stay at the inn. If you stay true to your reputation as the greatest thief in the universe, and break the rules of the inn by stealing from other guests or even the inn, then I might not be able to continue to host you. Wukong froze. The timing of the innkeeper's words was too coincidental. In fact, it was such a perfect coincidence that it was actually impossible for it to be a coincidence. Wukong, the greatest thief in the universe, was hated so because his skills were genuinely unmatched. Among the many things he stole, fragments of other Dao Lords' actual Dao were also included. Upon learning that the innkeeper could so easily locate the primordial garden, Wukong had had a fleeting thought, not one he would ever act on, of course, of maybe borrowing the innkeeper's Dao for a few days. No, not even borrow. Maybe just take a look at. A passing glance. A fleeting glimpse. At most, a cursory peek at the Dao. A monkey couldn't be blamed for being curious about how such an amazing feat could be achieved, could he? But obviously he would never actually do that. He was supposed to be on good terms with the innkeeper. He was supposed to cooperate with him. Wukong would never compromise that just because of a little curiosity. Oh, also he had snagged a letter from the innkeeper's table, not that he had been able to read it yet. There was a single business card attached to the top of the letter, sealing it with the innkeeper's power, preventing him from learning its contents without properly removing the card. Wukong coughed, and from within his armpit took out the letter. By the way, on an unrelated note, I found this on the ground, and thought I'd return it to you, he said as he quickly placed it on the table. The innkeeper gave him an amused glance with a raised eyebrow, but said nothing. Instead he just opened his drawer and slipped the letter back in without touching it. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, let's talk about something else. Since I'll be staying at the inn for a while anyway, feel free to let me know if there's anything I can help out with. Oh right, I'm depriving the inn of other Dao Lord guests. Should I invite some of my friends over? Don't worry, they won't take any discounts and will pay for their stay. Honest? Internally, Wukong was sweating as he wondered how his actions had been discovered. No one had discovered his theft so quickly before, ever. At the same time, Lex was exerting even more control over his state of mind, not allowing any fluctuations at all over the fact that his guest had somehow bypassed the protection of the system, within his own office, and stolen the governor's letter. Earlier on, Lex had, in an attempt to divert the topic from opening up a connection to the primordial garden since he didn't actually know if he'd be able to do it, randomly asked his guest not to steal. In his mind, it would be a gentle way of reasserting his position as a host, and as a powerful yet mysterious figure. The next thing he knew, Wukong had reproduced the letter with a flimsy excuse and an incredibly guilty look. What Lex hadn't noticed, partially due to the fact that he was in an enclosed space, causing the system to be cut off from the actual inn and not getting any feedback, was that the fishing well had also undergone a slight, practically imperceptible change. It was almost as if, previously, there had been a perfect decoy well operating inside the inn, so perfectly created that even the system had failed to detect it. Yet now, it had spontaneously and coincidentally returned to being the original at that exact moment. Chapter 1523. Don't take it the wrong way. The innkeeper stared at Wukong for a moment before responding. The Midnight Inn would, of course, be more than happy to host any friends you wish to invite here, given that they obey the rules of the inn itself. But considering that it is your mission to protect one of my workers, for the sake of your own mission, I think it would be best not to attract any kind of unnecessary attention towards the inn. Inviting some of your friends may be counterproductive towards such a goal. Yes, of course, Wukong agreed readily. That makes perfect sense. I have to keep the mother's mission at the forefront of my priorities. The innkeeper nodded, and then paused for a moment, as if in thought. Normally, I do not make special allowances for guests, the innkeeper began, taking on a slightly more serious tone. But seeing as how your purpose in coming to the inn is to protect one of my workers, and that might include staying here for a long time, I think it is best we reach some form of an understanding. You can act as a deterrent against other Dao Lords and others as you wish, and oversee whichever one of my workers you want to protect. But if, for any reason, someone does decide to pursue you within the inn, or you have some kind of altercation, it must be done outside the inn. Neither the inn, nor its guests, nor the realm can tolerate the power of a Dao being haphazardly used. Yes, that's naturally my intention as well. It would not do if I end up harming the target I was meant to protect by releasing my power carelessly. Also, I would appreciate it if you did not repeat any incident that might attract antagonistic attention towards the inn. If the Jade Emperor pursues any of my guests due to wine they consumed at the inn, that would ruin the image and prestige of the inn. Such a thing is not acceptable. No, actually, you don't need to worry about that. This is not the first time I've spread the Emperor's wine. He won't actually pursue the matter, he can't beat me and he knows it. Alright then. I think we are at an agreement. I will overlook any actions you take in your pursuit to protect one of my workers, as long as you do not harm the inn or its guests, and that includes stealing from them. In turn, you can operate freely without concern of interference. If, in the future, you manage to procure assurances about Ventura, or have some other venture you wish to inquire about, you can directly ask one of my workers to send me a message. There is no need to burden poor Z with a letter of intent. That's no longer an issue anyway, Wukong said, waving his hand. Now that he's delivered my letter, his karma has been forever changed anyway. No one will be able to detect his connection to Zarek if his karma is overwhelmingly connected to me. Then again, I suppose you would not have let anything happen to him. Even so, he's now safer than ever before. Excellent. So I believe that wraps up all of our business unless there's something else you wanted to talk about? Unexpectedly, Wukong did not answer immediately, instead just staring at the innkeeper for a moment. In that instance, his shy or embarrassed expression faded away, leaving behind only an imposing mien. "I have a question for you, though I don't want you to take it the wrong way," Wukong said, his voice suddenly a lot more level than it had been during the entire conversation. Before asking the question, Wukong plucked a single hair from his face and let it fall. The hair quickly began to change, suddenly transforming into another Wukong who looked and felt exactly identical to the first. "I've heard that you excel in attacking through karma," both the Wukongs said simultaneously. "So does that mean if you attack me once, you can attack all my clones simultaneously?" Even though Lex was keeping strict control over his emotions, the question couldn't help but cause the hair on the back of Lex's neck to stand up. Yet Lex's mind did not waver, and his emotions did not fluctuate at all. The innkeeper, instead of seeming intimidated by the question, only chuckled softly. "Before answering, let me ask you a question first. How familiar are you with karma?" "If you had asked me yesterday, I would say I am proficient in the ways of karma. Today, meeting you and seeing your clear lack of any kind of visible karma, all I can say is that I am slightly above average." "Why do you ask?" "Well, I ask because I wanted to make sure you understand that karma is a two-way street," the innkeeper politely instructed. "For example, if you go around and litter at the Midnight Inn, it can be considered as breaking a relatively minor rule of the inn. The karma, then, between you and the inn would similarly be mild. If I attack you through such a chain of karma, let alone all your clones, I doubt even the clone I targeted would feel anything. But let's just say, for example, of course, that you, through some accident, broke a major rule of the inn, and thus developed a very serious karma with the inn itself. An attack through such karma. I truly wonder if it will reach all your clones after reaching your main body first. After all, a clone's karma must also affect whoever or whatever is controlling the clone first." A silence pervaded through the room as the two of them looked at each other, Wukong with curious eyes, and the innkeeper with an unassuming, warm smile. Eventually, though, Wukong smiled as well, and dismissed his clone. "You're right. I think that wraps up all of our business with one another for today." Chapter 1524 Don't sleep in a communal shower. The innkeeper stood up from his seat, as if to see Wukong out of the office. "By the way, before I leave," said Wukong, returning to his casual self. He summoned a small, cylindrical container made of wood, and placed it on the table. "I'll leave this here with you. It contains a gabana fruit from the primordial garden. Since the fruit cannot survive long without the aura of the garden, the container isolates its aura. With this, you can at least begin working on locating the primordial garden, even if you don't intend to connect to it yet. I shall get back to you with the confirmation from Ventura soon. In the spirit of our cooperation, I won't refuse this gift," said the innkeeper. "Normally, I do not easily accept gifts from my guests." "Come now, innkeeper. There's no need to be so formal. Trust me, we will be working closely together in the future." With that said, Wukong removed the many barriers he had placed around the room, though their effect did not seem to immediately vanish, continuing to isolate Lex from the rest of the universe. Wukong, instead of teleporting out, walked to the door and exited through the normal way. Lex did not immediately react upon his exit, and instead sat back on his chair and slowly rubbed his chin, as if lost in thought. He did not even look towards the container for the fruit. If anyone were to see the innkeeper now, they would assume that he was lost in thought, whereas in truth, Lex had not a single thought running through his mind. He had no intention of moving either, not until the protective aura around him vanished. In truth, there was no possible way for Lex to know whether or not Wukong was spying on him, and waiting until he was reconnected to the system was little consolation. Even so, it was not as if he had much choice in the matter. Fortunately, it did not take long before the effects of the isolation wards began to fade. Unfortunately, just a few moments after Lex regained access to his system, he was struck with an image of a Go board in his mind. A rook piece appeared, and crushed one of Lex's beads. Without warning, Lex was struck an immense pain in his gut, so severe that, despite his usual indifference to pain, he keeled over. Or maybe it wasn't the pain that caused him to fall. Lex felt like he had been struck by a sledgehammer right in his stomach, right before someone used a flamethrower to help him melt hit fat away. The pain and burning sensation in his body was not just pain. Lex could feel how his body was suddenly unable to deal with its own increased strength, and his muscles were ripping his intestines apart. Yet his immense recovery kicked in, healing him even as his organs were shredded, again and again. "I'm going to make you regret this," Lex said through gritted teeth as he began to work on handling the situation. Visualizing himself ripping that accursed Nas race member apart limb from limb really helped him focus for some reason. His physical body ripping itself apart, regardless of how painful or drastic it was ultimately just a flesh wound and would not permanently harm him. It was a huge inconvenience, that was not in doubt, but the most lethal thing about it was the timing. The shock of the sudden cultivation deviation, though this was a cultivation deviation of his body, was more than enough to cause him to lose control of himself. It was not a big deal now that he was supposedly alone in his office, and even if it had happened in front of a crowd it wouldn't have mattered. But Lex couldn't help but notice that the rook piece appeared almost exactly after his own connection with his system was restored. The timing was too coincidental. The most likely scenario of what happened was that the rook had been used while he was in a meeting with his guest, but it had failed to reach Lex since he was being shielded by the guest's isolation wards. Lex could not even begin to imagine what would have happened if Lex, as the innkeeper, had suddenly keeled over in front of his guest. The consequences would have been devastating. That could have potentially been the very end of the Midnight Inn. Much more importantly, Lex refused to believe that this was just a coincidence. That accursed Nas had some way of knowing that Lex was in a precarious situation, and had to have targeted him exactly at that moment. As Lex took control over every single muscle fiber in his body, one at a time, slowing down and eventually stopping his muscles from ripping his organs apart, a plan began to meticulously brew in his mind. Up until now, Lex had been taking the Go Bard seriously, but apparently he was not taking it seriously enough. He needed to figure out a way to end this game once and for all, and if that wasn't possible, he needed to establish some kind of precautions. Lex felt provoked, far more than the stupid Go Board had managed to achieve before, and he was not one to leave provocation unanswered. While Lex was plotting his revenge like some evil villain, Wukong was standing outside the innkeeper's office building and was looking back. The pressure he had felt as soon as he exited the innkeeper's office, that pressure had given him chills. As far as the monkey was concerned, it was a clear warning about how serious the innkeeper was about the rules of his inn. But that wasn't what Wukong was thinking about. Instead, he was wondering why the hell had he been sent to protect a worker of the inn, if the innkeeper himself was so strong? It seemed like there was more to this story than he knew. Meanwhile, on a vessel traveling through the void, away from the origin realm, an acolyte was in the middle of a communal shower when he suddenly collapsed, and started dreaming. The Warbringer, he had set his gaze on the universe. Chapter 1525. Sooner than expected. Oceans of flames filled the vast expanse of space as stars collapsed in the aftermath of battle. Armies of all races marched through the void, and the realm wars that had so far already wrought the lives of countless immortals became even more perilous. Standing atop the head of an ancient beast, one unseen since the dusk of the primordial age, the Warbringer came. With his sword in his hand, he plunged into the chaos, spreading devastation across the universe. The heavens rumbled, the hells trembled, tribulations fell, and calamity rose. The divine sought salvation, and the profane sought redemption. Conspiracies eons in the making, plans billions of years in maturing, rivalries multiple lifetimes in resolving, all unfolded haphazardly. Celestial might was challenged, and angelic rule was tested. The humanoids faced a menacing foe, but the menacing foe faced the Warbringer. History was unfolding rapidly, far faster than it should have, and events that shouldn't have happened for ages to come started to manifest. Amidst it all, the subtle influence of the Warbringer was undeniable. Where there was war, the Warbringer arrived. Where the Warbringer stepped, war followed. As the universe was blinded by the gleaming light of the Warbringer, deep in his shadows, an outline of a pirate ship remained undetected, radiating a subtle aura far more dangerous than even the Warbringer. Someone walked into the communal shower, and found the acolyte collapsed. The man hurried to reach out to him, but discovered that the acolyte, completely in the nude, was covered instead by some kind of invisible barrier. He could not be touched, could not be approached, and could not be awakened. The man quickly rushed out and found the acolyte's teacher, and the man quickly rushed in to find the odd scene. The teacher, naturally with his advanced cultivation, could break through the barrier and save the acolyte. But he could also see that whatever was happening to the acolyte was slowly raising his cultivation, and developing his talents. It was just, the timing of it was unfortunate. Seal off this area, and don't allow anyone to come in. My young disciple has encountered a unique kind of enlightenment, the teacher said, giving an explanation as a cover. Word immediately spread aboard the vessel about the acolyte finding enlightenment in the shower, and suddenly the demand for the communal showers rose rapidly through the roof. Everyone was taking showers in the hope that they, too, might find enlightenment. They did not, but at least the environment aboard the vessel became better. Meanwhile, the teacher went into the acolyte's room and picked up a journal and began to read through it. "Who are you, Warbringer, and why are you connected to my student?" the man asked the notebook. Yet he got no answer. Within the Midnight Inn, Lex had entered a loop of healing, cultivating, and slowly allowing his body to rip itself to shreds. Not only was such a cycle slowly making him even stronger, it was making his foundation firmer, so that there were no more chances of physical cultivation deviation. Due to how immense his strength had grown, it would take him a few days if not a week to completely overcome his situation. Within the inn, excitement seemed to fill the streets, not for the upcoming Midnight Games finale, but for another event entirely. The death matches between the Jotun Empire and the fiery mammoths had not gone as expected. The humans had shown far more strength than anyone had expected, and despite a stellar performance by the mammoths, they were losing. The next two fights would be the most intense. The next fight was from some noble called William, who was relatively unknown among the Empire, though within the Midnight Inn he was known as Lex's son due to some rumors that had spread. The last fight would be the Emperor's. It had been a long time since anyone had seen the Emperor personally make a move against an enemy, so they were all looking forward to the fight. Among the inn workers, there was another news that was spreading, which was a cause for joy. Apparently, Luther was about to return from the mission that he had been sent on. It had taken him a long time, but he had succeeded. Everything, at a glance, seemed to be going well within the Midnight Realm. The same could not be said for the Folklore Realm. "All right, which one of you did it?" asked Longbeard, the gnome with an 8-feet-long beard, as he looked out at the crew, each of them with red food smudges around their lips. None of them were willing to answer, but that hardly mattered. "All of them, I tell you." "It was all of them who tried to eat me," yelled an angry strawberry spirit standing behind Longbeard, waving the leaves on its head like angry fists. "That's impossible, my lady." "I'm sure there's some kind of misunderstanding," spoke Tiny Sparkles in his deep, calming voice, though even the velvety smoothness of his voice could not distract from his usually white coat that was now covered in red. "You can lie to me, Unicorn, but you can't lie to the city police. I'm reporting you and the rest of you for your crimes. Not to mention, this absurdly large ship of yours is taking up all the parking spots." "Fret not, my lady. We have already paid for the parking with Netherlily gold. As for the police, there's no need to involve the fine, upstanding police of the city in this minor matter. I'm sure we can come to some kind of an understanding." As the small dispute was handled, Jack lethargically looked out at the city in front of him. It was, by far, one of the most unusual cities he had ever seen, to be sure. The city was clearly divided into various districts, and each district seemed to be constructed keeping a certain race or racial features in mind. Most of the district was normally sized, though there was one for smaller races such as fairies and one for larger ones such as any number of beasts that grew too large. There were numerous other districts as well, some for fire-based creatures, others for elementals only, and one even for ghosts. The Jolly Rancher was parked in front of the district for giant races, but even then it took up the parking of multiple vehicles. But then again, what did that even matter? Parking was paid, of course, but since they could literally generate Netherlily gold, what value did currency even have? They'd paid for the spot for a month, since they did not know how long they would be here. It was in this city that Jack went up to the city council and applied to meet with the dwarf dragons. The procedure was actually quite simple. Since he was inside the dragon siblings' domain now, he merely needed to apply for a meeting and wait to be summoned. No doubt that the Dao lords he had sought to meet already knew of his arrival, but when they would call him was a mystery. In the meantime, Jack had basically moved into the crow's nest on his ship. The accursed stench that haunted him was somehow growing worse each moment. In truth, it was not that the stench was getting worse, but Jack's willpower and tolerance were waning. Since he had accidentally looked onto the karma that was wrapped around him, Jack had neither been able to eat, sleep, rest, or even cultivate. Food tasted horrendous with that smell constantly bothering him, and no matter how he tried to, he was unable to sleep. Occasionally, he could cultivate to somehow grow his tolerance to the smell, but he could not maintain such a state for long. Moreover, to his great dismay, Jack learned that his cultivation technique had no effect on his karma, at least not yet. Maybe if he was in a higher realm, it would be able to absorb his karma as well. But he was not there yet. During this time, Jack had also been thinking about the options in front of him. If he asked the Dao lords to somehow help him overcome the stench that was affecting him, then he would lose the opportunity to accompany them to the Artica realm. If he did that, he wouldn't be able to surpass his cultivation realm. But, if he didn't get rid of the smell, he would go crazy sooner or later. Based on how things were going lately, it was likely to be sooner rather than later. Jack sighed, hoping that he would get some kind of response from the city council soon. True to his wishes, the response came soon, though it was a lot sooner than he was expecting. One moment Jack was sitting alone on the highest point of his ship, his chin resting atop the railing, and the next he found himself dressed in an extremely regal gown, standing inside an opulent hall. In front of him, he saw a dragon. Also, he saw the dragon looking not at him, but at his unicorn first mate who suffered from dwarfism much like the dragon as well. Chapter 1526 The Dragons. So there he was, standing in front of a dragon, its green scales shining with a deep, alluring luster. Now Jack's stature was not the greatest, an obvious trait considering his race. But the dragon was, oddly enough, not so large either. The dragon was, at most, the size of an adult Great Dane, not that such a thing prevented it from having the most powerful aura Jack had ever felt. But if Jack felt immense pressure being in the presence of a dragon without any protective equipment, then Tiny Sparkles had it a dozen times worse, for the unicorn, who was still covered in red juice from partially eating a strawberry spirit, had suddenly been summoned right in front of it. As the unicorn had not been prepared to meet the dragon so abruptly, its brain shut down, and he just stood there, stunned. How peculiar, rumbled the dragon as he stared at the unicorn's horn. Instead of being negatively affected by your dwarfism, your body has become a more potent container for spiritual energy, while the strength of your horn has somehow increased. It's almost as if being shrunk has concentrated your abilities. I wonder if this is a natural trait of unicorns. Tiny Sprinkles could, naturally, not respond at all. Similarly, Jack did not presume to speak before his turn either, and instead looked down towards his feet. He did not even think, for he knew that even his own thoughts were not hidden from Dao lords. He simply waited until the dragon was done. No wait, I see you have quite a colorful history. Your higher magic concentration is not because of your size, but because you, how peculiar. I can't see the exact details. Let me see, here we go. Yes, as a child you bathed in the blood of a dying mythical creature, which caused several mutations in your body. For quite a while, the dragon seemed to focus on Tiny Sprinkles, looking through the many secrets its body held. Even Jack himself had never asked his crew about their pasts, so all of this was a revelation to him as well. It did not take long, however, before the dragon turned his attention towards Jack. You stink, the dragon said, though his tone was not disgusted. It was more like he was making an observation, just as he had been looking into the unicorn. Though, before he continued his observation, a gust of air blew around Jack, taking away the stench that had been haunting him for so long. Jack nearly fell to his knees out of relief when the smell, but managed to keep himself standing. Strong body. Stronger than usual, though the soul age and physical age don't match, yet they fit each other perfectly. A new soul born in an empty body? No, not quite. How peculiar, even your history is hidden from my view. Let's see, no, it's still hidden no matter what I do. How odd, your past is protected, but your present isn't. The dragon stretched its wings, and it was good that Jack was looking down, or else he may have had inappropriate thoughts about the scene before him. The dragon's wings were much too small in comparison to its body, though with the amount of power the dragon wielded, it hardly needed wings to fly. With a single flap, the dragon rose, and with another it flew towards Jack, allowing the dragon to observe him from up close. Yes, I smell the scent of mischief on you. I think I will like you. Very well, tell me what you have to say. As Jack heard the dragon's words, something entirely unexpected happened to him. His body froze, entirely incapable of moving. But from within his body, a projection, entirely identical to Jack, stepped out, and kneeled. My lord, my name is Jack, and I have not yet decided on a last name for myself, the projection spoke out loud, his voice filled with worship. I proclaim to everyone that I am on a mission to free the fairies from whatever curse holds them as slaves, and while that is largely true, I secretly have two other missions. The first is to grow stronger, and make my ship stronger, so that I can sail the universe unimpeded, and adventure and explore to my heart's content. This mission is both simple, and yet impractical and entirely out of reach for someone like myself. The second mission is to find a place, a realm, or some space that is entirely hidden and undetectable from the outside universe. The reasons for my second mission are. The dragon raised its paw, pausing the projection that seemed unable to speak about the reasons for the second mission. Jack, of course, knew what the reasons were, but he dared not think about that at all. Fortunately, it seemed like the dragon was not too interested either. Tell me why you have sought us out, the dragon said, speaking to the projection. My lord, I have heard tales of your immense power, and have also heard that you and your brothers are under some kind of self-imposed isolation. Yet the stories say that while you have isolated yourselves, you also seek out reasons to venture out of the bounds of your realm. I come bearing news of a New Age expo, being held by the latest mature realm in the universe, known as the Artica realm. While the expo is originally for the close allies of the Artica race, meant as a show of strength, they will not turn others away as they seek to carve out their own place in the universe. Right now, all allies they have are based on business, and do not have a strong foundation. Enemies constantly keep an eye on them, searching for the slightest weakness. Such an opportunity may serve the folklore realm well, which is why I thought of informing my lords about it. And what do you seek in return? The dragon asked, its thoughts completely masked. Originally, I sought to accompany you to the Artica realm. The unique laws of that realm present an opportunity for me to grow stronger, and break into the earth immortal realm while circumventing the curse that haunts my race. Yet as I journeyed here, I saw that which I should not have seen, and since then I have been plagued by a karmic stench that revolts me to my very soul. My very being craves freedom from this punishment, yet I have also promised my crew to bring them to the Artica realm so that they too may enter the earth immortal realm. Caught between a deep desire and an obligation, I have been utterly distraught. Yet I know, no matter how much my suffering, I will always choose to honor my promise to my crew. So, my only request of you, my lord, is to allow me to accompany you to the Artica realm if you decide to go there. Alright, you are dismissed. I will let you know of my decision shortly, said the dragon, causing the projection to fade away, as if it had all been an illusion. Jack suddenly had the most bizarre feeling. He felt as if the one speaking so subserviently to the dragon had not actually been a projection, but had been himself instead. It was just that, while he himself was the one doing the speaking, in his memory it looked like he was looking at himself, giving the illusion of some kind of a projection doing the speaking. The dragon grabbed Jack and Tiny Sparkles, as if picking up a couple of dolls, and carried them deeper into wherever they were. Since he could not really move, Jack could not see much, just the walls that he was facing. Brothers, it's time for a vote, the green dragon suddenly roared, its voice so devastatingly loud Jack felt as if his eardrums had popped alongside his heart and every other organ in his body. Yet somehow, he remained entirely unharmed. Another opportunity has been brought before us to leave the folklore realm. Shall we venture forth? Jack could not see the other dragons, yet as he heard their voices, he could associate the voices to the legends they likely belonged to. Nay, said Wrath. Not interested, said Pride. Nopesy daisies, said Lust. Never, said Greed. Ugh, said Sloth. I thought you went out to grab takeout, said Gluttony. Yet Envy, the green dragon, seemed to have expected such a response from his brothers, which is why he just chuckled. But what if I told you that the one who brought forth the opportunity is very peculiar, and has secrets that even I cannot see through? The green dragon placed Jack on a pedestal right in front of his brothers, like a prized possession, attracting the other dragon's attention. The next thing he knew, Jack was being stared at by 7 different dragons, each one with scales of a different color. How interesting, said Pride, the purple-scaled dragon. Chapter 1527 How peculiar. Jack, still unable to move, was looking directly at 7 small dragons, all identical except for in color. From all the legends he had heard, Jack could easily identify the brothers. Envy had green scales, looking like a jade sculpture come to life. Pride was purple, his scales making him look like a veritable sea of amethyst. Wrath was, quite predictably, red, like the scorching sun over a desert. Sloth was light blue, and just looking at him made Jack hear the soothing ocean waves, making him want to doze off. Lust had scales of deep blue, like brilliant sapphires covering his body. Greed was a matted gold, like oldest treasures, forgotten by all save time. Gluttony was orange, like a packet of Cheetos chips. Jack had heard way too many stories about them not to recognize them. Yet, similarly, because he had heard too many stories about them, he could not be sure about what their personalities were really like. He had completely sealed off his thoughts, something he already had some experience with, but he wasn't too sure if that would keep his secrets safe. He was already surprised that the Tao Lords had been unable to look into his connection with his other body, something he more or less was prepared to be revealed. He did not know whether it was a good thing or bad that he had managed to keep some secrets from the dragons, but it seemed like he did manage to get their attention. From having the Arctica race trip being outright denied, he had progressed to somehow arousing their curiosity, which was pretty good. The purple pride was especially intrigued in Jack, as he brought his head in closer to stare at the frozen fairy. Most peculiar. Though he has no thoughts wandering through his mind, it is not stunned by our presence, but is merely held still by his own command. It's almost as if he has some kind of resistance to the aura of Tao. Let me see, there we go. His body bears traces of exposure to amber chaos resin. How could a mere nascent soul realm fairy get its hand on resin like that, even absorb it, and not get turned into a puppet by some other power? It seems this fairy in particular is somehow resisting the karma that grips its race. Gluttony suddenly turned and looked at Jack with a dangerous gleam in his eyes. Amber chaos resin? Say, do you think fairies taste good? I've never had one before, because of the stench. But I could give this one a try. Shut up, Gluttony. Obviously you cannot eat the fairy, scolded Wrath. I change my vote. Since the fairy has interesting secrets, then it might be worth it to see where he leads us. Think carefully about this, Sloth groaned. Leaving will mean dealing with so many problems, not to mention it will end our long seclusion. Do we really want to deal with the repercussions of that? Come now, isn't this mystery just delicious? Questioned Lust as he licked his lips. It's about time we did something fun. Besides, the age is coming to a close, or so I've heard. If we do nothing, we won't even know how we got left behind. The brothers suddenly turned to look towards Greed, the golden dragon, who suddenly began sniffing the air. What's wrong? Envy asked, suddenly getting a feeling like he had actually underestimated this fairy. The fairy has mysteries, and so does the unicorn. But how did you ignore the biggest mysteries of them all? Greed waved his hand, and summoned both Goldilocks, and the crystal alligator, both of whom were similarly covered in red, looking like they had just come from a bloodbath. In his crew, he is two physical beings with the disposition of being elementals. How can someone under the influence of karmic bad luck gather a crew with two physical elementals? Especially when such a thing should not even exist. The brothers stared at the two in shock, and then immediately looked at the rest of Jack's crew. Ollie, the Shadow Talon, was relatively mundane, merely having the ability to turn his physical body incorporeal and enter the shadow plane. Longbeard, the gnome with a beard 4 times longer than himself, seemed even more ordinary if one ignored the fact that his beard hair was made up of adamantousweave spider silk, a material so tough it would take a heavenly immortal, at minimum, to cut it. No wonder he had such a long beard, he literally was incapable of shaving it. Monk, the bear cub, appeared the most harmless if one ignored the fact that he was being fed power from countless bear-related lores that should not have belonged to it. Pebbles, the hamster, looked utterly ordinary as well. In fact, if one ignored the fact that he had, at some point, attained both immortality and invincibility to overcome his tendency to have a heart attack over every little thing, then he really was nothing more than just another hamster. That left Bob. There was nothing ordinary about Bob, the deity of sugar rushes. Such a dangerous title was actually the least of his titles. The little drama cat was actually associated with the divinity of entropy. What kind of ridiculous title was that? The 7 brothers looked at the entire crew, and then turned to look at Envy, wondering how he had missed something so obvious. But Envy, just as confused, looked back at the fairy. It cannot be helped. Whatever or whoever is hiding his past, is so powerful that certain aspects of this fairy have been hidden from detection. The most devious thing is that one will not even detect that they have overlooked something. I am truly curious as to how this little fairy managed to get such protection. Enough, declared Pride, puffing up his purple chest. Look at you all, investigating a mere mortal like schoolgirls gossiping. Vote, and decide now our next course of action. If we are to depart, then let's go. If we are to stay, then return these mortals back to where they came from. Whatever secrets they have, is it worthy of us to spoil our status and prestige to look into it? Don't you tell me what to do, began Wrath, but Sloth just sat atop the red dragon's head, preventing him from speaking. All the brothers knew that if Wrath and Pride got into another argument, the mere nascent realm fairy would die of old age before their argument finished. I vote yes, declared Envy, as he gave Wrath a smug look. Ugh, voted Sloth. I am interested in seeing how this task brought by a mere mortal will turn out. In that case, I also vote yes. I sense this will be a very exciting trip. Yes, declared Lust. Before the other brothers had a chance to vote, Pride already spread out his aura from his body. Finally, Jack's pitiful mind was entirely unable to cope, and he blacked out, no longer aware of what happened afterwards. Since we have a majority vote, then it is decided. We leave the folklore realm. Our many old friends will be very excited to see us, not to mention those lizards who call themselves dragons. Make preparations. We will depart as soon as we are ready. By now, Lex was entirely used to the connection between him and Jack being disrupted, so he was not at all surprised when he found himself unable to sense Jack anymore. He could sense that his other self was alive, and that was enough for now. What was more interesting was that, for whatever reason, the dragon seemed unable to find Lex through Jack. He would have pondered more into the topic, but at the moment he was entirely occupied, trying to fix his physical body. Meanwhile, within the Midnight Inn, while all the excitement was at its peak, whether from the midnight games or from the death matches, there was one person whose mood was at an all-time low. Oh, cheer up, Vera, said Christine, Vera's mom, as she fixed her own earrings. Compared to the sulking Vera, her mother looked spectacular, having taken special care to dress up. She had even received the personal grooming of Harry Styles, which was easier said than done. It was not so simple getting an appointment with him anymore. Cheer up for what? I would definitely never meet that man if he hadn't somehow taken my powers away, Vera said, sulking. You don't know that he was the one who did it, Christine pointed out. The nexus point is getting closer, and it's affecting all oracles. It's not such a big deal if you get affected too. Besides, he's your father. He's perfectly entitled to grounding you if he thinks you're misbehaving. Vera snorted, ignoring her swooning mother. Once Christine was completely satisfied with her appearance, the mother-daughter duo finally left their room, off to meet Vera's father, who had only recently arrived at the Midnight Inn. Chapter 1528 Father-Daughter Reunion. Vera grumbled to herself the entire time she followed her mother, not that the love-blind woman noticed anything. They were going to go see the man because of whom they were held as prisoners on Earth, yet Christine acted as if the man had done them a favor. Vera clearly didn't like her father, but it would be too much of a stretch to say that she detested him. The issue she had with him the most was that he always tried to control her life. Now, one could say that there was nothing unordinary about a father trying to control their daughter's life, especially when she was young. The problem was, even when she was young, a mere teenager, her ability to see her own future was just as potent. The number of times she had seen him force her to do things she didn't want to, throughout the course of her lifetime, might have been fine if she actually lived through them. After all, if she was living through them, each instance would be spread apart, and would have given her time to get over the previous incident. But to see in one afternoon countless such instances, and then see them again every time she used her ability, it was too much. Not to mention, her impression of him wasn't so great to begin with. What kind of man used a woman as a shield, living freely and enjoying themselves while the woman rots away in prison with their only child? Maybe Vera's impression of things might have been a little biased, but Christine wasn't really in any position to tell her that, as she herself was floating through Cloud 9. The two of them eventually hailed a ride on a golf cart, traveling all the way to a small picnic spot near a lake, outside the city they had been living in. A few other families could be seen, sitting on blankets on the grass, fishing in the lake, and playing games with one another. Quite a few people were grilling some food as well, making perfect use of the pleasantly sunny day. Yet neither Vera nor Christine focused on any of that. There was a cabin nearby that could be rented, and in the veranda in front of it the figure of a blond man, sitting facing the lake, could be seen. Even though his back was towards them, both of them knew he was the man they were looking for. Vera groaned at how cringe the scene was. There was no way an oracle of his power didn't know they were already there. That meant he purposefully sat like that, his figure against the light, forming a dark silhouette. Who are you trying to impress? Vera groaned, yet an excited shriek from her mother the next moment answered that question. Robbie, my darling, she screamed as she zoomed to him. Robert, or Robbie as Christine called him, turned just in time to catch Christine in a hug as she threw herself at him. Robbie turned as he caught her, so that she was hanging in his arms looking up at him, and he looked down at her. Christine, my beloved dash, before Robbie, in his suave yet passionate voice, could complete his sentence, Vera's show that she had thrown from across the park slammed into his face. Don't you dare demonstrate any kind of disgusting public displays of affection, she yelled as she flew over, clearly missing her right shoe. This is a place for families and kids, keep that cheap, low-budget, cringe indie movie romance to yourselves. Oh Vera, my darling, you've inherited your grandmother's temper, Robbie said with a smile as he looked at his daughter fondly. Cut the crap, old man. I don't need to see the future to know you're here to cut a deal. Get right to business or I'm hightailing it out of here. Trust me, I can easily live a good life without the ability to see the future. Actually, I could probably live a better life like that. Ah dear, this is not how you talk to your elders. I guess I'm the one to blame, since I was never around to teach you. Hey, where are you going? Vera turned around in the middle of Robbie's ridiculous monologue and began to fly away. When he asked her the question, she only raised her hand and showed him the finger, not slowing down a bit as she flew. I suppose I deserve that, Robbie said while wearing a wry smile. Robbie, if you treat Vera like a little girl, you're going to lose your relationship with her, Christine said as she held his cheeks. You need to explain things to her, and this is your only chance. Robbie sighed. Can't a guy enjoy a little family reunion before getting down to business? He asked. But then, as he watched Vera fly away, without an ounce of anger in her body, completely indifferent to his existence, he realized that maybe he needed to have a family first before he could enjoy a reunion. "Hold on," Robert said, his voice suddenly a little more serious as he pulled Christine closer into his embrace. A moment later, the duo teleported away, appearing right in front of Vera. "Alright, fine, you win. Allow me an opportunity to explain," he said, looking directly in Vera's eyes without turning away. "Your explanation better be good. If you think you can turn off my abilities and blackmail me into doing what you want, you're sorely mistaken." "Nothing like that happened, Vera. Let's take a seat somewhere private, and I'll explain." Vera squinted her eyes, but followed as the man hugging her mother led. Somehow, he was a little less insufferable when he was serious. The trio returned to the cabin and stepped in, taking advantage of the inn's excellent isolation features. As you are probably aware, your ability to see only your own future is not natural. It is something I gave you. "Yes, I know," Vera said. "What you don't know is that I didn't have nearly as much control over it as you think. Have you heard of the essence wormhole?" "Of course," Vera answered. "It's the ultimate natural treasure for oracles. Absorbing it will allow them to see a fixed, immutable future." "Yes, but not exactly like that. It allows whoever absorbs it to see their own future, without a single flaw. Moreover, it is a future that cannot be changed. In that case, knowing the future, and not knowing won't make any difference at all. It can even be said to be a curse rather than a blessing. But I have been experimenting with the wormhole's energy for decades, trying to create the perfect tool for divination. During my experiments, I created many flawed creations which needed to be destroyed, yet I was literally unable to destroy them due to the immense power they held. But I discovered that, eventually, over time, they lose their energy and stop working. So, I did the most reasonable thing I could do. I brought all of my creations to a planet in a death zone, devoid of any spiritual energy, and left them where they couldn't do much damage. That's also why I left you there as well. You see, your previous ability to see your own future was not as perfect as you believed it to be. You could have wrought immense damage to the realm if you were allowed to interact with random people, which is why you needed to be quarantined on the planet called Earth." "Nice excuse. So why do you suddenly care about me now? If what you say is true, and I've lost my ability, everything should be safe now, right?" Robert gave her a look she couldn't quite identify, and it wasn't one that she liked at all. "Well, you see, there was an issue, one that I couldn't have anticipated. Of the many failed experiments I did, some of them lasted longer than others. Of the ones that lasted, a few of them somehow ended up at the Midnight Inn, and experienced an unusual phenomenon where the realm's star rank rose. Does that sound familiar to you?" "Yeah, I've felt it, more than once." "What about it?" Vera asked as an ominous feeling began to develop. "Well, recently, I managed to somewhat improve my own fusion with the wormhole, and that's when I learned something extremely dangerous. As far as I can tell, based on my experiments, those events somehow fused the wormhole's energy into those people, or items rather than allowing it to dissipate. Once that happened, they slowly started to pull the energy of the wormhole into themselves, slowly making their abilities stronger, and improving the accuracy of the future they can see. The problem is, if anyone finds out that a few weak mortals and immortals perfectly fused with the essence wormhole, then all of us are suddenly going to turn into universal fugitives, hunted by hundreds if not thousands of Tao lords to use as their personal slave oracles. Oh yeah, and I've seen just such a future happen, to all of us. That is our fate if even a single one of us gets caught." Chapter 1529. Who are they? Vera stared at her father, waiting for him to crack a joke, but the punchline never came. He remained serious, looking at her, waiting for her response. "How is that possible?" she asked finally, when he realized that he was being serious. "I've seen my future multiple times. Never have I ever been hunted down by a Tao Lord in any single one of my futures." "Well, yes, naturally, because there is an order to these things. The amount of essence wormhole energy in your body is actually the least of any of my creations, for I honestly never actually meant to drag you into this. It was more of an accident. Regardless, the principle is quite simple. Just as ordinary oracles suffer tribulations for trying to overreach and look into secrets too grand for their level, we, as in those attuned to the essence wormhole's energy, also have limitations. Primarily, the future we see is always fundamentally flawed. You probably saw your own future multiple times, but there may have also been countless times the future you saw was false, and didn't come true. That's because the future you see is limited by two factors, the first factor being your own cultivation level, and the second being the amount of essence wormhole energy you have. Limited by these two factors, the future you see can never account for the actions of those stronger than yourself by too large a margin. For example, when you were a Foundation Realm cultivator, the future you saw for yourself seemed reasonable, but that future did not properly account for the actions and intentions of those in the nascent realm. Those who have strong divination protection treasures also cannot be judged based on those two factors. Up until recently, that was true for all of us. So as our cultivation levels rose, so did the scope of our abilities. But once you fused with the energy of the essence wormhole properly, a change occurred. The stronger ones amongst you began siphoning off energy from the wormhole, increasing the limits of your power, and thereby also becoming more noticeable to the greater forces of the universe. You think the reason your abilities have stopped working is because I did something, whereas in truth, it's mostly because the others among us are siphoning off more energy from the wormhole than you. Since you did not even know about this, and could not assist the process in any way, the wormhole energy within you is completely concentrated on trying to absorb more essence wormhole energy, leaving none for you to actually utilize. Once I teach you how to actively accelerate your own absorption of that energy, all your powers will naturally return. By then, you will find that your ability to look into the future has improved drastically. Unfortunately, that also makes you a lot more noticeable. Dara squinted her eyes, trying to decide if she could trust Robert's words. She was not as blinded by his words as her mother was, so she remained skeptical. Robert, to his great dismay, could also see that Vera didn't necessarily believe him. How about this? I'll teach you the method to actively pull the energy from the essence wormhole, which should allow you to regain your abilities. You can then use them to see if your future has since changed. But the problem is, you won't nearly have enough energy to see a future affected by Tao Lords. You can merely search for hints to the fact that the future you see remains unaffected by those of a much higher realm. In truth, much of what Robert said made sense to Vera. She didn't need to look far for an example, just the actions of the Innkeeper were entirely unpredictable to her, and almost every time a major event occurred within the inn she found herself surprised to some extent. Of course, she had no intentions of admitting as much to Robert. Alright, let's assume I try out your method, and find your story convincing. Then what? Should we just huddle up in a hole and live there until we die? The first, most important task is to gather all those who are actively absorbing the wormhole's energy. I have expended a great deal of effort, combing through countless futures to narrow down the list so that we know who to look for. We all need to gather together and remain out of sight. Even if that is not possible, they need to be warned not to use their abilities so easily, lest they get discovered. If even one is discovered, we'll all suffer the consequences. Alright, so then who are these people, and how do we go about finding them? Vera asked. I do not know their current identities, Robert confessed with exasperation. I only know some of the identities they hold in their futures. One is the commander of the Henali armies, Legionnaire Raphael, hero of the Champions tourney. I don't think the commander himself is absorbing the wormhole's energies, but he definitely has some kind of treasure that is benefiting from it. In the future he is one of the most formidable and terrifying strategists, laying waste to entire races so long as they stood in his way. I managed to gather some rumors that his personality changed because he lost some family or friends or something like that during the very Champions tourney that earned him his fame. Whatever the case, he is not an easy man to talk to, at least in the future. The second person I managed to narrow down was even more mysterious, and no matter what I did, I was unable to discover his name. He was only known as the Herald of the Warbringer, prophesying war and devastating wherever he went, though he always laid blame to an even more mysterious warbringer that no one could identify. He is especially dangerous, for I heard rumors in one of the futures that I saw that he accurately predicted the actual destruction of an entire major realm. Chapter 1530 Road Trip. Are you absolutely sure about this? Asked Suda, a look of extreme doubt on his usually stoic face. Yes, definitely sure about this, said Raphael, waving his hand to shoo his Japanese companion away while he read some documents. Like I said, the trial of eternity is the perfect place to undergo our earth tribulations. It will be more dangerous, yes, and the tribulations will be stronger, yes. But we have a rare window to take advantage of while the realm is still drained from the megastorm it recently experienced. If all of us trigger the tribulation at the same time, then the additional strength of the unique realm will be divided amongst all of us, and due to the drained state of the realm, it'll just barely be enough for us to tolerate. Trust me, there's a reason why it's important we undergo our earth tribulation there. Since that realm is so sensitive to tribulations, the baptism we'll receive there after becoming immortals will far surpass any other baptism we can get anywhere else in the realm. It'll automatically give us a huge advantage facing any other earth immortals. Considering all our competitors are already immortals, and have been for much longer than us, we'll need every single advantage we can get. Suda looked towards Anakin, whose expression looked dark, and not just because his mastery of darkness had improved by leaps and bounds. Raphael, do you not remember the trial of eternity? Apparently, during the previous round in the tourney, over 1,000 immortals died there. Over a damn 1,000 immortals. How do you expect us to survive there? Do you remember what the tribulations there looked like? Is that something we're supposed to be able to survive? Anakin questioned, a heat rising in his chest. Not to mention, you saw how his tribulation was, right? How are we going to fight off those lightning monsters as tribulations? That's not normal. He knew it was too good to be true. Raphael had been acting like a heaven-sent commander, and each of his commands was enigmatic but turned out right, allowing them to gain massive points in the previous rounds of the Champions Tourney. Sometimes the situation had been entirely unexpected, but Raphael always knew exactly how to resolve the problem. It was almost like he could see the future. Just when everyone was getting used to his unusual leading style, the maniac went ahead and signed them up to go back to the freaking trial of eternity. Moreover, they were going there to undergo their tribulation. Normally, that place would be off limits. But because the previous batch that had gone in were almost all dead, they needed a new batch to go in and figure out a way to keep that unique place contained. Actually, considering that the entire region has been shrouded in darkness for countless years, I expect you'll thrive there. The darkness there is ancient. That's besides the point. Anakin exclaimed, though he could not help but feel tempted. By now, Anakin's cultivation style was entirely unique, no longer absorbing spiritual energy, but a special kind of energy that was only born in darkness. The darkness in the trial of eternity was especially potent for him to absorb. Raphael turned away from his document and looked towards Anakin, who was glaring at him with resigned anger. Suda, too, looked troubled, though Larry and Alexander did not seem too bothered by the impending danger they were about to face. Anakin, when have I led you astray? Trust me, if I wasn't confident in myself, I wouldn't be joining you all as well, would I? Not to mention, I'm even bringing my dad along. Trust me, as long as we follow my plan, nothing will go wrong. Besides, Lex's tribulation was a little too abnormal. We won't face anything like that. Larry opened an eye and looked at Raphael. Don't say stuff like that. It's bad luck. Raphael chuckled, and turned back to his document. I don't believe in luck. I believe in my preparation. No, you don't understand. When you're chasing after a girl, the moment you become overconfident or cocky, you'll lose her. What you're doing now is called raising a flag. Repent, before you get us into trouble. Don't you have a girlfriend? Should you really be talking about chasing girls? Larry coughed into his hand and looked away, returning to his silent meditation. Raphael looked at everyone else in the room, and when he saw that no one else had any other complaints, he turned to look at Alexander. why do you look so glum? It's not like you, he asked. Alexander sighed, then opened his eyes and explained. My family is secretly preparing to retake Earth and the solar system from the deities and the AI. They're setting up alliances and laying the groundwork for our return. So? I don't see why something like that should depress you. Are you intimidated by the strength of the enemy? Alexander shook his head, as if the burden he bore was too great for him to mention. What is it? You can tell us, said Raphael, suddenly feeling concerned. He had never seen Alexander so depressed. It's just that, while every other force was weakened after leaving Earth, the Morrison family's strength has grown exponentially. Don't even talk about our armies, we have so many nascent realm soldiers underneath us that it's become imperative for multiple family members to become immortals if we're to retain control of our forces. But that's not really an issue. My parents and grandparents are all more than capable of becoming immortals, I'm sure of it. It's just that, since the size of our forces have grown too large, my grandfather declared that we need to grow the size of the family. My grandmother is expecting, and now so is my mother. Now my grandmother sends me a letter every week asking me when I'm going to bring a girlfriend home. This is ridiculous. I don't know how to respond to these people. Everyone in the room was dumbstruck, and turned to look at one another, as if to confirm that they had all heard the same story. Once they were sure, they all simultaneously burst into laughter, quickly forgetting about their impending trip into the trial of eternity, the very same place where Lex had undergone his own tribulation. While the rest of their ship was filled with solemn silence, their room was filled with loud laughter and the sounds of someone cracking jokes. They looked more like a group of friends on a road trip than participants in the champions' tourney. Then again, one reason they were so relaxed was because Raphael had never led them wrong before. With him in the lead, they were certain they'd be able to handle whatever issue they faced.